Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our City Council Budget Development Meeting. We just finished with our City Council study session, and so we'll go ahead and get started with our Budget Development Meeting. Ruth, could you call the roll, please?
Sure. Adamson?
Here.
Bray?
Here.
Cheatham?
Here.
Johnston?
Here.
Lurick? Black?
Here. So we'll jump to agenda item number 2 is the fiscal year 2019 budget development items. Looks like we are looking at the FY19 health benefits. Heather Buchanan, Human Resources Director, will give a presentation on employee health benefits.
Good morning. Heather Buchanan, Human Resources Director.
And I'm AJ Argyle with the Levitt Group. We're your broker on the benefits currently.
So as council requested, we went out for a full RFP on our health benefits this year. The very big, colorful spreadsheet in front of you is all of the options that we had to consider before we're making the recommendation we did today. The large pile of paper at the end of the table is all of the plans that got submitted to us. So if you need some reading, we got some available. I'm going to walk you through our options. We are looking at probably a carrier change, a rate change, and a plan change.
So nothing significant.
Nothing. Very, very non-stressful items are coming to you today. The 4 areas that we need guidance on to build the budget itself is the carrier, plan design, we need to address retiree health benefits, and I'm asking you to look at the VEBA benefit currently offered to employees. We are looking at a double-digit increase. I know that isn't the news you wanted to hear, but I'm going to give you numbers as to why we are looking at that. I have fiscal year 17 numbers, and I have 1 month of fiscal year 18, so all I'm going to be able to address intelligently here is 17. These are our 12 months sorted by premium minus cost. 8 of the 12 months, Aetna paid out more than we paid into them. So for every $1 we paid Aetna, they paid out $1.06 in costs.
And the way that works too, so that 106% loss ratio, that does not include administration. And generally, carriers tack on another 15 points for administration. That's what they're allowed to based on ACA guidelines. So you add on another 15 points to that, it's 121%. So essentially they, administered your plan for free and paid out an extra 6 cents on every $1 on top of that. Then on top of that, when you're figuring the renewal, you also have to take into account what's called trend. And what trend is essentially medical inflation. And what that means is if you have the exact same claims next year that you have this year, you would pay that inflated amount. And they're currently calling trend between 8 and 9%. So you would tack that on as well. So you're looking at the 106%, you would tack on the 15% for administration, put you about 121. Then you add in another 8 points for the trend, and you come in at a 29% increase, which was the initial increase given to us by Aetna.
So it's $1.06, not 106.
No, it's 106%. We just use the dollars.
No. Look at the slide. It says $106.
Oh, sorry. It's so for every 100 we pay, for every $1, it's $1.06.
Okay.
I need to move my decimal there.
Okay.
It's hard because I go back and forth between percentages and points and numbers, and so that is a typo. You had to find the typo?
Or for every $100 we paid out $106.
Yes, I also could have made the typo that way. So another thing that we asked Aetna for was the number of deductibles met by individuals on our plan. So these numbers are presented on a calendar year, not on a fiscal year. That's how Aetna provided me the numbers. So we had, out of 716 individuals on our plan in 2016, 90 people, or 12.5%, met their deductible. 2017 was a little bit better at 11.5%. So if you calculate the deductibles met in calendar year 16, it's 252,000, and in 17 it's 238,000. That isn't all money towards deductible, that's just the ones that actually hit the numbers. So there was obviously additional spending. This is just once you hit that threshold, we're counting it.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's not a huge amount of people hitting their deductibles, and I'm going to kind of explain. Okay, one, I want to read the bottom of this slide first. Human Resources is very intent on keeping the VEBA benefit for employees. I in no way want that to go away, but I want to explain what a benefit it is. So the first pay period of fiscal year 16, we paid out $860,000 in VEBA. If you look at our costs for 16, so I had to just break it down roughly, that $180,000 in deductibles means we paid out $680,000 to employees in VEBA that is originally intended to go to your deductible that was not spent towards a deductible. That is only if you're hitting the total number. Like, I'll go to the doctor, I didn't hit my deductible, I still spent money towards it. But if we were to look at a traditional buy down of deductible, so the city would not pay money unless the employee hit that amount, it would save us a lot of money. I just want you to understand how big this benefit is to employees. It's over $500,000 a year at a minimum. So when we talk about health benefits, VEBA very much has to be included in what benefit we're providing. I am not asking council to move to a traditional deductible buy down. I'm asking you to stay with VEBA. I just want you to understand its worth for our employees. You guys have supported it for 10 years. I hope you continue to support it. Out-of-pocket max, calendar year 16, 29 people or 4%, and then family, 5 people or 2%. So that comes out to about $156,000. That's just for the total out-of-pocket max where they would not know any other money. Obviously, more people than that hit their deductible, but they didn't hit that greater threshold. So our utilization again here, thankfully we don't have people hitting this number in alarming numbers. Fiscal year 17, we had 50 unnecessary emergency room visits. That's very expensive for our plan.
Do you know, are those like unique visits, or do you have people repeatedly doing it?
I don't have a head count or a name tally to that.
I just wondered if, okay.
So to walk in, that means that the person could have waited 12 hours to see a general practitioner or gone to an urgent care. Our urgent cares we have one open till midnight, so that's about an 8 or 9 hour span where someone chose, if they had no other option, they'd have gone to the emergency room. Obviously, I'm guessing some of these 50 happened during the day or during urgent care hours. Prescription costs, a quarter of our health plan costs are spent on prescriptions. If you do not take a medication, this might be a surprising number to you, but that is 25% of all of the costs. This is not unreasonable, but it is slightly high.
We are going to implement a program. It's a system actually where we will take your claims and we'll plug those in, and we actually have 2 physicians on staff as well as a pharmacist that will actually review those claims. And if we can find cost-saving medications or a cost-saving treatment, what will happen is that physician will actually reach out to the employee, the spouse, the dependent, reach out to the member and ask if they're interested in exploring other options, and the employee, the dependent, whoever it is, has the right to say no, I am not interested, and then we'll just move on and go on about our way. But if they are interested, we will talk to them about it. Then our physician will actually reach out to their physician and find an alternative treatment that might be, have some cost savings to it. So we're hoping to generate some savings with that moving down the road as well.
We're already paying for that. It's not an additional cost.
Yeah.
So for fiscal year 19, we need to address carrier and the design of our plan itself. We had 4 people respond to the RFP: Aetna, Pacific Source, Regions Blue Shield, and Blue Cross. We're not recommending Aetna, Pacific Source, or Regions at this time. I can go into specifics on this, or I can just explain why we went with Blue Cross.
Well, I was just curious on Regions, just because you did like a renewal and then you did the Blue Crosses on this.
Yep,
Yeah.
Blue Cross, those are the 2 options.
So it sounds like they were lower than Aetna, but were they still higher than Blue Cross? Is that your reason for?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So off this spreadsheet?
Is that this green one?
No, that is so there's like 29 options on there.
Okay.
That's all the plans we had to consider before we made a recommendation.
So, but Regions is on the green, right?
Yeah,
So
the
if I
Regions
wanted
is
to
on the-
re-get
This is on the green.
It would be on
Correct.
there, okay.
Yeah, Regions, if you're comparing apples to apples, Regions was sitting about 4 points higher than Blue Cross was, and so that's why we made the decision to recommend Blue Cross, was because of that 4 points. So
So Blue Cross is our recommendation. The biggest reasons for that is they have the largest market share, which means they can get us better percentages on what we're paying with local health companies. They have the numbers that can get us the discounts we need. That just basically boils down to that. I think we all understand if you buy in bulk, you get a better rate. We're now buying healthcare in bulk. We're also recommending a change to the plan itself. Currently, it's listed on the far right, we're asking for a $500 increase to the deductible, and we're changing out-of-pocket max slightly. The other big difference is the prescription costs. We have tried to cap that as much as we can so that we don't pass those costs on in a harsh manner to employees. So we have put a max out-of-pocket cost on that as a deductible of $1,000 for an individual, $2,000 for a family. The other difference is the refills would go down to a 30-day supply. So most of the tweaking on that spreadsheet is playing with the prescription numbers. I can show you on the next sheet, you have another cross option that there's a difference in the prescription, and it is a big percentage adjustment. So we tried to balance the needs of all employees, not just the employees heavily utilizing prescriptions, but we didn't want to punish them for using them, so we put in the max out-of-pocket cost.
What's the advantage of a 30-day supply over a 34-day supply?
It's kind of like throwing really, really nice rims on an okay sedan. You've increased the cost, but not really the value of the plan. So it's helping a small number of people. It's like a frill on our plan. If I take that off, our percentage increase goes up considerably.
And to administer that, it actually costs a little bit more because that's actually a manual process because all fills are in a 30 or a 60 or a 90-day supply. So to do the 34-day supply is actually a manual process on both the insurance carrier as well as the pharmacy.
Why don't we allow a 90-day supply?
That'd be 3
Do it
copays.
one
Yeah, you
time.
can do that. It would just be the 3 copays is what it would be. There's also mail order as well. You could set your prescriptions up on mail order and they could come directly to your house as well if you'd like.
Prescription's one of the hardest things when talking about healthcare because it is so personal to employees and it can be a staggering cost each month. You're very non-communicative. So the Aetna renewal initially came in at 29%. Blue Cross, to match that perfectly across the board, came in at 25%. We obviously tweaked with the prescriptions. We changed the emergency room copay to $250 instead of $100. That $250 is waived if you are admitted. We're trying to drive down those unnecessary ER visits. We'll readdress that as necessary. And then just to show you the difference in what prescriptions would be, here we took off the out-of-pocket max and we left a percentage in here for specialty drugs. It increased the percentage by 7%. And that's still with the adjusted copay. So for me to pull this max out of pocket, it drives up our cost by 7%. So we did ask employees how they felt about this when I ran the health benefits survey. 32% of the 159 responses to this question did not want higher deductible. I'm proposing a higher deductible anyway because the city itself and employees cannot handle a 25% increase on top of costs already. It's a balancing of need versus want. That's why I kind of showed you how many people were hitting their deductibles. Employees are still identifying medical insurance as their number one priority. Second, obviously, becomes pay raises. If we go back to that 25%, I don't know if we have room in the budget for me to ask for the one-step minimum increase that I've asked for at this point. So I need guidance from council, or I'm sure you want to ponder this. We're looking at a possible carrier change and also a change to the plan. Some feedback would be appreciated.
The $250 copay that's waived in emergency room, if you have to have a procedure there, is that being omitted even though you're dismissed 5 hours later? Like you break your arm and it's set in there, or something?
No, you'd have to be admitted on an inpatient basis. You'd have to be admitted as an inpatient in order to get that $250 copayment waived.
So even though you didn't plan it, but you fractured your ankle and they're able to set it, you'll still pay $250 copay?
Yeah,
Yes.
correct. And it goes towards your max out of pocket, so,
Yeah, but most people's intention isn't to max out their out-of-pocket.
yeah. But if you
You
broke
know,
your leg or
to
something
take
like
care of
that, it could happen pretty easily. You know, if you need pins or surgery or something
Yeah.
like that. If it's just a setting, like you're saying, a couple $100 or something like that, then unfortunately, yeah, that would be money out of your pocket, so.
So wouldn't it encourage people to beg and plead to be kept overnight?
Hospitals usually don't admit you unless it's absolutely necessary. 'cause
I've been on the other side of this.
I know, it's just 50 unnecessary emergency room visits, that's one a week. That's a really high number for us. You're not walking out of an ER for less
Well,
than
I
1,000.
understand the one side, but I also understand the other side where people learn how to game the system the other way.
If you're going to need an ER, you're going in. If you have a kid with a broken leg or you have a broken arm, you're going into the emergency room. You're not going to make them wait till the next morning.
Yeah.
Because your doctor's probably, I mean, if it's severe enough that they're going to probably send you to the
Well, what I'm
hospital
saying
anyway.
though is that you say, oh, I just don't know, I think I need to stay here. And the doctor says, well, I'm not going to dismiss you if you got aches and pains that we're not monitoring. You know?
He would still have to admit them, though. Generally, what happens in that situation is they keep them under observation, which is still an outpatient category on that. To be admitted on an inpatient, they have to have a good reason. They have to submit the coding that matches that as well. So they couldn't just, monitor someone and then admit them on an inpatient. So, I mean, it could be an issue, but I really don't see it being an issue, to be honest with you.
They go in and the kid breaks their leg after school, they get it fixed, and the parent says, well, you're on overtime, aren't you, doctor? And they're still hurting. How do we know that they're going to be able to leave? And the doctor says, well, I want to go home. Let's just put them in the hospital. Is that a likely scenario?
Well, not really, because then what happens is the coding has to match. So you have an inpatient admission to the hospital, and I've seen these before. We've had the coding come across with this. You have an inpatient admission to the hospital, and then you have a broken leg. So what happened is the insurance company would automatically kick that claim out because a broken leg is not qualifying as an inpatient basis. They could stay on an outpatient, an observation status, but they couldn't come in under an inpatient basis. The coding would have to match what's going on there.
Okay.
If someone's having heart pains and it's on observation status, they're more than likely going to admit that person. Even though they're on observation, they're going to admit them for something like that. But a broken leg, additional pain like that, probably not. I've had situations where people have had just stomach pain, random stomach pain. They've left them under observation overnight, gave them some painkillers and stuff, and then sent them home. So.
I'm just saying that what you gain in one, if you get a couple overnights because of this, you've lost, haven't you? I mean, it's a even Steven again.
I mean, that's a possibility, but we've had this in other cities. We've done this in Rexburg and Idaho Falls. Idaho Falls actually was running almost 5 times the state average as far as ER utilization. We have been kicking up the copayment consistently. We've got them down just below the state average. It took us about 5 years to get us there, and we're actually at a $500 ER copayment to do so, but we have seen the ER utilization actually drop. We've done the same thing on Rexburg, and we've seen the same thing as well. Once the employee has to think about it a little bit, it's their money, they tend to make a better decision generally. So, but you're right, there is that possibility, but it's a tough thing to do. You're borderline, insurance fraud if you're trying to admit someone on an inpatient basis when they're technically not eligible. And insurance carriers can usually block that kind of stuff out just based on the coding. So,
What is the state average?
state average, I don't have the numbers, to be honest with you. I could get them though.
How do we rank?
What?
How do we rank?
You're pushing close to double as well, to be honest with you. I mean, it wasn't good. I expected worse, to be honest with you.
What's the nature of the, you said you couldn't disclose who those persons are. What's the nature of the unnecessary visits?
Also not provided to me.
I can tell you from our other experience, what I've seen with other groups. I mean, I've had ER utilization for allergies, diarrhea, constipation, abrasions, headaches. not even migraines, just a headache, all kinds of random things like that. And that's why we really crack down in a lot of our other groups on that area. And by running up the ER co-payment, in every single group we've done that, and we've seen the ER utilization drop. So we've not had a group that it hasn't worked. So.
Heather, when we moved to Aetna, there was some displeasure on the part of our employees. Do you sense that our employees would be happy to return to the Blues?
So Tuesday, we sat down and we gave this presentation. We invited all department heads and basically like their top level managers. I packed the room, no offense. The biggest question we got out of that is, why did we ever leave? I don't see that there is any hiccup from employees that I have heard that they would have a problem returning to Blue Cross.
Oh, we left because it was $400,000 different.
Yeah.
And I understand that. It's just, it is very hard on employees to transition health providers. There is a lot of angst when you can't get your prescription filled because the process is different. I have those people standing in HR crying. So it's very important for me for them to like our carrier. The comfort factor, I know you can't put a dollar amount on there, but a couple percentage points is worth it to me.
So we had a lot of angst when we changed last time,
Yep.
and we're going to have a lot of angst again
Yep.
when we change, I'm assuming.
We will.
So how are we going to mitigate that angst?
Well, we have a more interactive broker at this point. So they've been helping us with a lot of the problems that employees have been having. Last time we were transitioning, we were also changing HR directors. And we were in the middle of mediation with one of our unions. So hopefully my summer is a bit calmer, much calmer. I don't see staying with Aetna as a viable option. I don't think they have the market share to get us the discounts. We're going to see continued increase in cost. I asked Aetna if they had grown their presence in the region, and they had not.
To mitigate that angst, we already know some of the issues that are going to come up.
Yes.
Can we not address them now opposed to?
We have, to a certain extent, like take your medications, for example. Generally what happens when you change carriers, you may have to go back into step therapy, you may have to pre-authorize a drug or something like that. Blue Cross is actually going to honor all current medications. They're going to just automatically roll over, so there'll be no pre-authorization, no step therapy. Everyone that's on a current medication will be grandfathered over. So we won't have to worry about the filling of the medications and things. We're also going to go out and meet with all the different departments, go over everything. I think it'll be a little bit different than it was with Aetna, because part of the problem with Aetna is you didn't have all the providers and all the facilities in network, and with Blue Cross you will. So that was part of the problem, I think, before as well. You know, they're trying to find, you know, is my doctor in network, is my doctor out of network, whereas now they can go back to a situation they were familiar and comfortable with, and with their market presence, you'd have to look pretty hard to find someone out of network, as opposed to just about everyone is in network. So the one disadvantage is that unfortunately Walgreens is out of network for Blue Cross, and I think we might get a little bit of pushback on that, but we're going to be sure to send out a lot of communication to the employees and make sure that they're aware of that, so they have plenty of time to change and look for a new pharmacy. But I think with education, I think we'll really be able to get the employees there, and I think we'll be fine. We're going to do electronic enrollment. Everything will be sent over electronic. Won't be any part on HR employees or anything like that. We'll have cards in hand well before 10/1. So I think it'll go a lot smoother than the other transitions.
And so their wellness program, which we had to go through and sign up and provide a lot of information, we'll do that again with Blue Cross.
We're going to actually, we're implementing another program. We're bringing in case management and health coaching is what we're doing. So what's going to happen is if you have elevated blood pressure, maybe you're borderline heart attack, stroke, or something like that, you'll actually have a nurse practitioner or a health coach reach out to you and ask if you'd like to make some lifestyle changes and actually work with you on that. So I think that'll be really great. I've got that currently in Idaho Falls and Rexburg. The employees love it. To have that one person that kind of, calls them every 2 weeks, eggs them on, helps them, change their diet, diet, different things. I mean, they'll even do things like if you've got the video on your phone, take me to your fridge, show me what's in your fridge, show me what's in your cupboards, and kind of help them make smart choices in that. And that's actually, we were able to get Cross to, roll that in as part of the cost for this first year. I think the employees will really enjoy that, and I think it'll actually help control costs as well when you're helping employees make those lifestyle changes. So.
Every department, almost every department was at the meeting. The only ones that weren't were animal services in the library. So I'm sure any department head would be happy to give you their opinion on this. We've told them if they reach out, I asked them to wait till this meeting so you could at least have the information presented to you before they started bombarding you.
One other question. So if we make the decision right away that we're going to move to Blue Cross, and a whole bunch of people say, well, I'm not going to wait to get this fixed because it's cheaper for me to do it now, what are our ramifications with that then?
There are none. Our premiums are fixed. They can't charge us anymore. I mean, to be honest with you, I'd actually probably encourage it.
The ramifications are at an expense per dollar goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, we will have to use a little bit of Aetna's experience in the renewal because, I mean, when we get our renewal next year, we're going to have, 3-4 months tops of experience with Blue Cross of Idaho, so we are going to have to pull in a little bit of Aetna. We've left the window open to maybe renegotiate in June or July on that as well, so.
So yeah, that will definitely affect the experience rating if everybody
A little
goes.
bit, but I mean, they understand also that, Aetna doesn't get the same discounts as Blue Cross, and that's why Blue Cross was the most competitive. So there's that swing difference there. I mean, on some services, we're seeing a difference of 20 to 40% between Aetna and Blue Cross, so.
I'm going to venture that I'm not going to get a guidance on either one of these items today.
Probably a good venture.
I'm in favor.
I don't think we have a lot of choice. I mean, you boiled it down. Unfortunately, that's where the world's headed in terms of healthcare in the United States. We're always fighting this battle every year.
Yeah.
And we have to drill down the best we can, and we've drilled down as far as we can, then we've got to make the changes. And you've drilled it down to Blue Cross, and we've drilled it down to these areas, and unfortunately, that looks like where we're at. Or, part of it might be that we have to, I think we looked at covering the individual more wholly, and anybody else had to pay a bigger participation. Did you explore that?
So I didn't bring a percentage distribution change this year. I'm also not bringing a defined defined contribution. I left the percentages as to what we agreed to last year. With the 11.97% increase, Joyce already has that built into the budget numbers you're going to see in a minute. It was a hard year for me to ask you to shoulder more or employees to shoulder more. I just kind of left suffering across the board. If I don't bleed us a little this year, we're going to hemorrhage in a couple years.
I'm prepared to make decisions.
I bring you such joyful good news. I mean,
Well, I have a comment. I know Heather's looking for some guidance. I know there are going to be employees that are not excited about this. I'm not overly excited to see 29% increase either. I'm sure Heather's not excited to see that, but we have to at some point be realistic, as the others have said, and look at the numbers. And I think after looking over your spreadsheets and
so it's a
comparing
$30.
the options, I think you've hit upon what is going to be the best and most realistic option. Even though change is hard, you may have some people that are not thrilled about it, but I
It's a
think that
$30 a month
either way
increase
we're
to a
going to be,
family.
yeah. So I would say let's go with your recommendations on both of those items.
I'm with you.
So we had a benefits committee that we worked with as we did the survey, and we had the RFP out, and then when we met with the managers, they were asking the same questions that we've been asking AJ for months now. Why don't we partner with another group to buy healthcare together? We can't join the county program because it's for counties. The IIIA, which is a small group that buys insurance together, we would almost double the size of their pool. So we would help them, they wouldn't necessarily help us. Why they've worked well for them, they also have a different type of hospital situation going on than what we have in Pocatello. You look at a small community, that hospital is going to cost you a lot more to walk into, so their experience costs are going to be higher. We're not big enough to be self-insured. So we've looked at pretty much every option that is available to us at this time.
Okay, well, I got two that are all in.
Like a half.
I mean, the numbers kind of speak for themselves. My concern really truly comes down to changing yet again. And I remember what it was like, at least in my office, when we changed last time, and I'm sure your office was a lot worse than mine. And I just want to make sure we mitigate any of those issues beforehand, opposed to cutting that off and then having people find out later that they're not covered in this and that. They're not. There's some pretty serious stuff out there that people worry about. I mean, when 83% of the people said that health of our employees' health was the most important thing.
Medical insurance came out as number one, yes.
The medical insurance, 82, well, I guess, I don't know what your numbers were. 82 employees said that anyway.
Out of 159.
So that's significant in my mind, that this is pretty important to them, so I don't want to, I hate to bounce back and forth with this. And so we were worried about, when we went last year with that, that they would jump, and obviously it's jumped, and I'm sure there were some factors in the last 3 months of the first 3 months of them covering us, or we had some people doing, people wait till the end of the year and max out their.
That's hard. Our renewal is basically built off of our 4 most heavily used months for a big portion of it. So October, November, December, people start using their health care a lot if they're close to their deductible or out-of-pocket maxes. So when you do a renewal, you have to look at those 4 months of data. That's pretty hard on you. But that's what happens when your fiscal year runs opposite of a calendar year. Just the nature of the beast.
But the good news is dental insurance isn't going to go up.
That's right. I even have a sheet that says dental insurance isn't going up.
That's the good news.
All right, do you want to go to the next
And I
fun
just want to
topic?
make sure that we're okay with the VEBA, because the VEBA is
Well, I'm getting there.
pretty important. Oh, was that our next one?
You're not done making tough decisions.
Okay.
All right, so for fiscal year 19, I also need us to talk about retiree health benefits and VEBA itself. I'm sure you've heard Joyce use the term OPEB. That's other post-employment benefits that employees who are no longer working, so retirees, receive other than a pension. Due to our audit, we have to do an actuary study because of our OPEB benefits. That's roughly $12,000. That isn't the personnel cost, that's just the report of the study. Currently, the city is covering that cost. I'm asking council to agree with my thought that retirees should be paying the cost of their health plan. That includes the cost of this study. So currently we have 36 individuals on the plan. The cost of the reporting is roughly $1,000 a month. So that would cost those 36 individuals $28 a month. That $28 a month would be for the reporting costs only, and that would have to be reassessed by finance. I don't know if they'd want to do that monthly or quarterly based on the number of participants in the plan. We also do charge retirees an administrative cost of $10 that would continue. It is the benefit they're receiving. I feel that they should be shouldering the cost. I'm very, very popular right now.
Is this, because we provide that benefit, does it show up as taxable to them?
No, it shouldn't show up as taxable to them. It's just that this is just reporting that's required by the federal government, right, Joyce?
Yes,
Yeah.
well, it's required because we've included them in our pool. And by having them in our pool, it's an implied subsidy because they're getting a better health care rate by being in our pool. And because of that, it's considered a post-employment benefit, okay? And by accounting rules, we have to report on that because it does have an impact into our rates and what we're charging our active employees, and so you have to report on that, and that's why the actuary study comes into play. Because we have to project of the active pool of employees, how many could possibly potentially go into this and what is going to be the cost ramification. That's what the actuary study does. And then to be in conformance with accounting reporting rules, I have to have the actuary study so that I can report on those numbers within the financial report. I know that the retirees are going to be upset about this. I know that when we charged, we created the $10 last year, I had quite a few come to my office, and once I explained to them that, and just this past year, that we were only having to pay $6,000, but by the time I go into fiscal year 19, the reporting requirements on this is going to go vastly higher, and so that the actuary study is going to go from $6,000 to $12,000. They understood the reason why they were being charged the $10. I agree that I think that they should bear the burden of the cost. They're getting a great rate by being in our pool, and this is a cost that I don't think we should be bearing the burden on, because if they were not in our pool, all of this would go away.
Why the increase?
Why the increase? It's reporting requirements. They're looking at it more in depth in the reporting structure. It's kind of like, I don't know if you were around when I reported on GASB 68 is when we had to start reporting on PERSI within our financial statements. The complication of that reporting model has now been applied to OPEB, and it goes into effect in 19. And so it's well, let's put it this way, and without getting into detailed terms, my report increased by 12 pages with GASB 68. My reporting requirement under the old OPEB was only a few pages. I know this is going to exaggerate it by 3 or 4, at least more pages, okay? So there's more detail as to the implication of this post-employment benefit and how the actuary sees it and how it impacts the city finances as a whole. So it's not, those two are my least favorite rules that we have to play in. But I think it's an appropriate expense for those retirees. It's a cost of having them in our pool, and I think they should bear that burden.
Not to skip ahead in your slides, but I saw that you just switched to the next one. If the retirees were in a separate pool, would that eliminate that reporting requirement?
Yes.
Okay.
And I can address that. When we did send the RFP out, we asked for retirees to be rated outside of our pool. We got numbers back from Aetna on that. It would be a 2-point increase to our cost because retirees had a healthier year. But what that doesn't tell us is what the cost would be to retirees. They would drop off of a large group plan pool and move to a small group plan, which means a higher cost for them. I don't know if the higher cost is going to be a $38 a month difference, but if they were not rated in our pool,
It'd be significantly more. You're probably looking at a 30 to a 50% increase in cost for the retirees if we were to pull them out and separate them on their own experience. We will separate the experience so you can see the difference between the active and the retirees with Blue Cross moving forward. But if we were going to separate them out, it'd be a significant cost increase to those retirees. So
the better deal for them is to pay the current
absolutely.
fees.
Oh, it's a no-brainer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
So what, could we get those numbers officially then still, or if we're past the RFP?
No, we could definitely do that. If we decide to move forward with Cross, we could talk to Cross about possibly pulling them out.
Just so we know what that information is.
Yeah, we can look at
and-
that.
Okay. I would be interested in those numbers.
Okay.
so I know Councilwoman Adamson would like to see the numbers for them on their own on their own pool. Is that a universal feeling up there?
They won't be good.
No, they will
No.
not.
Yeah, so I think we ought to ask for the retirees to pay that $10 because it's still such a great benefit for them.
Well, it would be.
They're going to pay
it would
it
be-
regardless.
I mean, the 28, I guess.
And that number, as people drop off, that number will go up substantially for people participating in the plan.
Will it go down as we get more retirees?
If they stay in our pool, yes. There are options for retirees outside of our pool. Our pool is easy because they know it and the costs are less, but there are things outside of what we offer that they could be using.
So, Jim, to be clear, the $10 fee a month, they are already paying. So it'll be a $28 a month increase with 36 people, with
That's a
30.
moving number.
If that drops down to 25 people,
Their number
that
goes up.
$28 increases.
Yes, that's
Would
correct.
we be able to counsel these retirees to go to another program?
Absolutely. We'd sit down with them. We've actually, when we first took this over, we haven't needed to as much, but we actually met with all retirees. So we came in, and anyone that had questions on the benefits or was looking to retire soon, we actually met with those employees. In the first couple months, we packed the entire day up, but then as we got towards the last couple months, we weren't seeing anyone. So, but we're always available to do that. And we actually have one person on staff that just works with retirees and does that. So.
What do you think the effect of these other insurance changes will have on that retiree pool?
As far as
Push any out or suck any new ones in?
You mean the change of what we've done to the plan?
Yeah.
I don't think it'll affect anything personally. If they want to be on, they're going to continue on. I mean, if they're on right now, I don't see a $500 deductible change really pushing them one way or another. So.
Okay.
I'm still not sure you guys have actually answered a question for me.
Ask again.
We're good at that.
I know, it's unnerving. So, VEBA. Currently, employees are only eligible to participate in VEBA if they are a participant in the City of Pocatello Medical Benefits Plan. That doesn't mean they have to be the carrier of the plan. If their spouse works at the city and they're covered under insurance there, they still do get their VEBA money. Right now, it's a $1,500 lump sum and then $500 paid in wellness once you submit your exam form. I would like to move, okay, there's 3 parts. Part of them are very unpopular, so I might not get any feedback on. I'd like to see the wellness exam move to $700. We're seeing probably low 90s for response rate on this. Employees are submitting this form. The lump sum would then be adjusted to $1,300, and I would like to see that paid in a per paycheck distribution. So instead of a lump sum, the first pay of October, every paycheck they would get $50. There's 2 reasons. VEBA is the city's effort to offset the cost of the deductible. That was the original intent, but it's really hard to apply that because that was 10 years ago and healthcare has changed so much in a decade. But that's kind of the philosophy we've operated with. And most employees do not hit their deductible the first pay period of October. They usually hit it throughout, like if they hit it, they're hitting it hopefully later in the year. Additionally, it would eliminate paying out the entire year to people who leave employment. Most of our retirements happen in the late fall and the winter. We're paying out those people if they get their wellness exam, their full $2,000, and then the new hires coming in at $1,700 or $1,800 if we bring them on the end of the year or the first of the year. So we are paying that double, and that's not really a cost that we account for when we do budgeting. I know like the water department lost, I think 5 people this fall. So Justin's budget had to pay out VEBA, and then we got hit again with all of the new hires. So the distribution, this would only be for general employees and the This does not affect the fire department. Their contract is separate. I just want to make that point clear because employees did ask about it. The distribution, the lump sum, it's something they turn on in the payroll system and then they turn off. This would just be leaving that running. So if we go to like quarterly or biannually, we just have to turn that feature on and off. The more we turn that on and off for distributions, the more likelihood of error there is. So I would either like to say with a one-time lump sum or go to a per paycheck. And I understand this is a big difference. It is not a decrease in the benefit though. It is just a difference in how it is paid to the employee. This was very unpopular with department heads when presented.
Why do they object to it?
I don't like to use the word entitled, but when you make a change to a benefit like this that's been long-term structure, it's very hard for employees to deal with. It's a comfort blanket for a lot of them. They know if those costs arise, they have that money available. Some employees that I talked to in the benefits committee, I didn't really run this by them because I only like to take so many meetings on a certain issue. We do have employees that are constantly hitting their deductible every year. So they're spending their full VEBA money, but they're never hitting their out-of-pocket max. So they're constantly almost up to that threshold every year. If you have a chronic condition that isn't life-threatening or isn't like massive cost with prescriptions, those employees are exhausting this money and usually right away once they get it. So it would be a detriment to a small number of our employees. I already hog a lot of the budget between salary and benefits. If I can whittle down at all with payouts, because I know that's an issue council's been interested in, I thought I would start small and start here.
Heather, I'm sure this would be maybe a pain to you administratively, but is there a way that you can do it where it's spread out over the year, but give the ability for an employee who is in a specific circumstance to come in and get access to that if they needed to? There's not.
It's going to be uniform.
That'd be discriminatory.
All right.
And that gives me way more information about an employee's health or family's health than I'm comfortable having. It's a big change.
Yeah.
So
I was just trying to think of a way if that was a concern.
Want
that
you to
someone had
percolate and
okay.
think on. Item 3 actually comes from something Councilman Bray asked me for right after I started as director. Any full-time employee who's eligible for city group health insurance would be given their lump sum in VEBA. I'm just going to call it a lump sum right now because that's how we're operating. They do not have to be a participant of our plan. That is a huge change from what we're currently doing. They would have to show that they have eligible qualified group health insurance coverage somewhere else, and they would have to submit that in writing. This would be an increased cost of VEBA. But if you sign up for VEBA just as an employee only, for health insurance, just to get the VEBA, you make $1,600 a year after your costs. That's just your monthly premium versus your VEBA amount. So for the city to pay that person VEBA, because that's the only reason they want to be on our health plan, it costs us over $6,000. So they have health insurance somewhere else that they would rather be on, or they're double covered, but they're taking city insurance solely for the VEBA money. Every time I have an employee do that at a single rate, it costs the city $6,000 to pay them $1,600. That's a big number, and I can't tell you how many people would drop off our plan. I can think of a handful right off the top of my head without actually having to go out and ask employees. That's just, I know because the employee has told me they are only taking our health coverage for the VEBA.
I know you don't have specific numbers, but is there a chance that, let's say, that handful of people do go off because they get the VEBA, but then there are some other people who are already off and it just is a wash?
Yes.
Okay.
So when we did the survey, 51 employees identified that they have health insurance somewhere else. That isn't saying we're going to lose 51. We have 457 total full-time and half-time employees eligible for benefits. Currently, 23 people are not on benefits. That number is a bit murky because it doesn't count those people that are insured under their spouse at the city. So if I added the 23 people times the 2,000, that's a $46,000 increase in the VEBA spending. That isn't covering any drop-off, so we would need 8 employees enrolled at employee only to see a gain. Now that's real dollars spent. That isn't your budgeting numbers that we're tying up with this plan. And I know there is a distinct difference, but they're both painful.
Try it. Might be worth a shot.
The first year, I'm guessing our utilization would be lower than year 2, just because people tend to be less trustworthy of something when it's new. This is another really big
So
change.
if you were going to try it, because I've heard that up here, let's give it a shot.
It
What would
be a
your trial be?
A 2 or 3 year trial,
Not just one.
not just one. We might see savings right off from year 1, but it's a lot of people are going to be like, well, what's the catch? What's the city getting out of this? I'm saving the $6,000, but the employee's still getting their money. Not everyone's as trusting of you and I as we would like. I'm just going to throw that out there. They would think there's an ulterior motive. People just aren't as trustworthy anymore, and I understand why. There's been a lot of changes with healthcare and the costs rising. They want to know why they're now getting something for free, basically.
So what would be the downside if you tried it and then decided to go back?
It would
Taking
just
it
be a
away.
change in practice for employees. You would be removing the VEBA benefit from somebody who had received it for the year. So that is seen as a decrease in benefits for them.
They could still get it, they just have to enroll in
They
it.
would have to
Yes.
enroll. That is correct,
Correct.
sir.
And we're allowed to provide VEBA as that health benefit exclusive of providing insurance to them.
Yeah, it shouldn't be an issue. It's not linked, and we can set it up. Even if it is linked, we can just change the plan document language. I've requested that information. I was going to go through that and double check that. And if there was some language that tied the two together, we would just separate it out. So,
I asked the question because I had employees that said, I'm only doing this because I get the VEBA, it's $2,000 advantage, and I get double insurance by doing that. And so they thought if we could give them the VEBA and they only have one insurance plan, it would be better for the city.
absolutely.
This is a question for the Levitt Group. Did they have other entities that have a VEBA or something similar that have gone this route, and has that been the result, or do you not have any comparable?
No, because like City of Rexburg, what they do is they actually pay the employees if they don't take the benefits. They give them $250 a month is what they do. They don't allow them to tap into the HRA, but it works out to be the same as the HRA, so they just pay them the $250 of their check. So, I mean, similar, but it's worked out really well for them. They had a lot of people that were on the covers drop off. It's been very beneficial, and they have no plans of changing it anytime soon. So,
Those people would still be eligible for the wellness exam. They would have to submit the form just like a regular employee. So they would get the $1,300, and if they wanted the additional $700 or $500, they would have to submit their wellness form. We still want employees doing that health benefit for them, even if they're not on our coverage. So other easy decisions I need here, or guidance that I'm sure I'm not going to give?
I like all of them.
One of the things we do with our coverage, we are more sensitive to those who are more critical need for insurance. So I'm a little bit reluctant to put the VEBA into installment payments. I do think that it makes sense to go from the 500 to 700 because the wellness factor is huge, and I think
It is.
people get detected early by doing that, and if we're missing a portion of our population, we're not doing the right service for our city. And so I'm okay with this 500 to 700. I'm okay with the last thing we talked about with the VEBA payments for those who elect it. All we're doing is we're doing the same thing as Rexburg in a different way. Whereas we're providing VEBA, they're providing $250 a month, right?
correct.
So we're very similar in that. But I'm not sure I want to change the lump sum. That's where I'm at. I'll do 2 of the 3.
You want me to say where?
I got 25%
Sure.
back.
I would say yes on 1, yes on 2. On 3, I'm still vacillating, and the only reason is just because I would not want to get into a situation where we gave it and then we realized, oh no, that was the increase of our expense and we shouldn't have done that, and so now we're taking it away, and then people are going to be very upset with that. So that's my only
Okay.
hang up really about that one.
I'm good on all three.
I'm good on all 3.
So you got all of us good on at least 2 of them.
2 of the 3 for sure.
We're doing a lot better than I had anticipated as far as some direction.
I understand the lump sum opposed to the paycheck, but I'm kind of with Roger on that one. I would like to see the lump sum maybe start January 1
Well, that is an
opposed
option. If we stayed with the lump sum, we could defer that to the first of the year.
to, I mean, if our real concern is we got people that are staying until after October 1 to get the $2,000 extra and then retire October 2.
Well, usually retirees wait until they've accrued a lot of vacation into December. And I know you guys have asked me to look at accruals and leave, and I'm not quite ready to bring that to you. So here is my attempt to bring you a very small $2,000 piece.
But if that's our major concern, then to me it would make sense to do it in January.
We could move the lump sum to January with the deductible year. That's also an option.
If that's a big concern we have, so, I don't know.
And we can motivate them because they could get the
They can still get their wellness ahead of time.
they could get the 700 earned as soon as possible. So
Yeah,
that might be motivational to know that one's coming in January, but you could get the other a little sooner. Or you could trigger it sooner. We don't guarantee it'll be there sooner, but you trigger it.
You got to sway someone sitting next to you.
I guess the one thing, I just had a thought, the one thing that wouldn't address if you changed it to January would be if you hired someone in December and they got it and they left and they just got a sweet signing bonus.
Most people don't bounce quite that quickly through
Okay.
jobs, luckily, because recruiting is already hard in this market. But the VEBA tool is something we use for recruiting. So I'm very glad that if you did nothing to this benefit and you left that as, I would still be happy.
okay, well. I think that I'm good with 3, I'm good with 2. And I can go either way with the lump sum or paycheck or not. So,
If you don't give me clear direction, I tend to wander down my own path. So am I counting at 3 to 2 right now? Or am I going to pick your brain at the working lunch next week?
you'll probably pick our brain at the
Okay.
working lunch. But I think conceptually everybody's
We're okay with proceeding with 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Okay. So just so we walk through all of this very heavy information I gave you, HR is recommending Blue Cross with a plan design of a deductible of $2,500 and $5,000, a $250 emergency room cost, is it 6-2?
It's 5-tier.
5-tier
That's right. They
RX,
call it the 6-tier now.
and the RX max out of pocket in place. I'm asking for retirees to pay their reporting costs and stay in our pool, though I will get you information for what their cost would be in their own pool. And then lastly, on VEBA, we're considering 3 options, and I have a go on 2, and we want to talk about it later on 1.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can you put any data together on 1? Is there any history to show people that may have gained that?
People that leave, I can tell you how many people retire in the fall.
Yeah.
I mean, their driving force is not VEBA. I'm not saying that it is. I just know that that's a cost I can address without changing our leave plan. But I can get you numbers on that.
Okay.
I can tell you when I consult with employees of other municipalities and things that do similar setups to this, they will wait to get that other payment. So they will wait 3 to 6 months for their retirement just to hit that other payment. So they do. I mean, the employees should. They understand their benefits, and so that's what they're doing. I don't know if it's necessarily gaming the system, but
Sure it is.
they're utilizing
We all
it.
look for an advantage.
But they are aware of it. Most retirees, when you talk to them in this situation, they are aware of that situation. Especially if you're looking to go in a 3 to 6 month period, and if you wait the full 6 months, you get an additional $2,000. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So I will be back with vision and life insurance.
Okay.
This is all I can
We
process.
took care of dental though, right?
Yes, dental's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Dental's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well,
End your suffering with me.
but
Hold on, Heather.
I just want I know how tough this is, but the difficulty of what you're doing is because of the drastic changes we're going through in healthcare in our nation and the instability that's there. And so I want to, thank you for being forthright in your process, and also let the employees know we know their angst, because we feel that. We're dealing with this craziness, and our response is going to seem a little crazy because we're dealing with crazy.
It's a lot of moving pieces we try to keep a thumb on, and it's almost impossible. The Levitt Group does a lot of that for us in the office. If I had to read all those binders by myself and understand them, I would have been here in like June. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we will continue on with the fiscal year budget development items. Joyce Strohschein, Chief Financial Officer, will give a presentation breakdown of fiscal year 2019 budget items. I know, right?
Okay. I'm Joyce Strohschein, Chief Financial Officer for the city, and with me I have...
Ashley Welsh, Senior Accountant.
Okay. So, I forgot to change the date when I got the wrong file. Right file. Okay. So we're going to give you an update on the cable franchise fees, Funds 955 and 962, which you had questions on last week, and the interfund fuel rates, 100% fee-supported funds, the rate study, compensation and benefits, some early estimates on the impact of our choices that we're leaning towards. So, for Fund 955, which is referred to as the CDR Loan Trust Fund, funds were generated by old housing loan repayments and ISU research park repayments. And so the council has the discretion to determine how to spend these funds, okay? The intent by the planning department was to use these monies should CDBG not receive its full federal funding, or if it decreased to a point where they were going to have to finish out a year, because their program year runs April 1st through March 31st. And so that's why this money has kind of sat there waiting to be used if needed, okay?
How much is in there?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
It's about 90.
90,000.
I've got my reserves, so I'll tell you here. $96,129, so just so you're aware, you have the discretion to make decisions, but that's how it's been programmed for, okay, is just the intent that I explained. Okay, Fund 962, which is the Facade Loan Trust. This fund was established after the closeout of the state-administered CDBG grant program when we became an entitlement city. The council has discretion to determine how these monies are spent. The Facade Loan Trust Fund was created for property owners in the Business Improvement District and the Warehouse Historic District to assist with improvements to the exterior of their buildings. There's also provision for grants, a small grant for awnings and signs. So that's what this fund has been built for. There is about $42,000 in an outstanding loan. It's a deferred loan, and it's to the Idaho Food Bank for $42,000. So that's all the activity that's occurred in the fund at this point.
Ever?
Oh, I'd have to go back. I think there were a few other loans, but this is the end result.
There were, did you want to get there, just answer briefly? This was a really going concern. Sorry, Melanie.
Yeah, Joyce, or Melanie, why don't you come up here?
I would come up, Melanie.
All right.
Melanie Gigley, Planning and Development Services. This fund actually had a great deal of activity in it in its early years. In fact, had some recapitalization from various places because some of the big downtown buildings that have had changes actually had assistance through this fund. So right off the top, I'm thinking like Pioneer Block is one of the big ones, the Eagles Building. So it was a very active fund for a very long time, and they've been repaid. It just has not been very active recently.
How old is this fund?
Late 90s?
Yeah, it's
mid to late 90s, because we've been in entitlement since then.
About 20 years then?
Yeah.
Well, and you're in a restrictive area because you're only providing this support to the Business Improvement District area and the Warehouse District area.
So the funds are still restricted?
Well, they're restricted only by your commitment to restrict them. I mean, you, as the council, have the power to decide, I want to continue with this program or I don't.
Or not, yeah.
And how much is in that account?
There is $72,682 as of the end of fiscal year 17.
And the food bank repayment, is there any schedule, any
It's a
expectation?
deferred loan.
sale.
And so if they sell their property, we'll receive our money back. Otherwise,
And they were looking at expanding or relocating it, last I
And-
heard.
Yeah,
So
they
it's-
are. They're looking to,
yeah, it could be a
One of the two
possibility if they do.
things.
Okay. Okay, cable franchise fee. This revenue was established by Idaho State Code 50-3003 and 50-3007. Chapter 30 of the Idaho State Code is on Idaho Video Service Act. So basically, the franchise revenue received by the city is for right-of-way access for the cable lines, okay? The council has the discretion to determine how these funds are spent, just like our other franchise money that comes in.
So there is no restriction on providing video services?
No. Okay, we'll move on to fuel rates unless you have questions on those three funds. Okay, fuel rates for 2018.
Joyce, I actually do. This video services, it just doesn't sound right, and it doesn't feel right. But maybe I'm completely wrong on that.
Well, I Ashley did the research. I had her pull up the information, the two state code sections on it, and it very much indicates what you have to have a requirement. The first thing in the Code Section 50-3003, the requirement is to have a certificate of franchise authority. And so she went out to the state of Idaho, the Office of the Secretary of State, and found the certificate of franchise authority, which allows us, the City of Pocatello, the City of Chubbuck, City of Basalt, City of Briery, City of Firth, and Fremont County to receive the franchise money. Then it goes into, when you go into the 5007 or the 3007, that's when it discussed the obligation to pay the fee shall commence upon commencement of the provision of video service to subscribers. But it doesn't go into any detail as to how the money that is received by those entities, how they have to expend it.
So City of Chubbuck is named there.
Yes, they do.
They don't have video service, do they?
That's right, and they receive.
So that's what state statute says. What does the contract say? Does the contract contradict that?
There was an ordinance, but it was repealed, and I've got to look.
It was repealed when the
Hang on
state
just a
took over
second.
franchises.
Yeah, when the state took over, but we
okay,
have a
yep.
new contract with the cable company.
Yeah, and I do not believe there's anything in the contract that supersedes. Back in 2011, we repealed the ordinance which required us to have video services, to use the money for video services, and so it was repealed. It was ordinance number 2980. It repealed the original ordinance, which was 2902, that stated we would no longer be held to that criteria, so it just basically removed it. That might be what you were thinking of.
Well, I remember something. That's maybe that was it.
Yeah.
And I'm curious of what the contract we have signed in 2012. We signed a contract with Video Services.
We can double
and
check. We can double check the
Cable One
contract.
for that.
We can double check the contract, but but by
I
city
think the
code.
contract went away when the state took over franchising.
It didn't go away for the city. We signed another contract in 12.
Okay, we'll double check the contract, but from a city ordinance point of view and from state law, we're not required to.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll double check what the contract has in it.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking.
I just want to make sure we.
Well, no, I would rather make sure that we haven't missed a part because we
Yeah.
don't want to do something that would impact us later. So I have no problem doing that.
Yeah. So double check that. That would be good.
No, that's fine. Okay, are we ready to move on to fuel rates?
Because they were,
Yes.
us trying to get them to.
Okay, in 2018, we budgeted $2.50 per gallon, and then for diesel, and $2.80 per gallon for unleaded. And how much we create in the interfund charge for each department is based on their usage of the prior year, okay? So if their usage went up, then we're going to give them more dollars because their usage went up in that prior measurement period, which is March 1st through February 28th. It's not even on a fiscal year basis. It's on a, well, the closest measurement period we can get to and still create a budget on. So it gives us the most current information. Fuel rates for 2019, which was provided, the information was provided by the street department, and we may end up pulling Tom up here because he also goes out and double checks his information, the information that we generate to the U.S. Energy Information Administration to see if it's in line. And so what it's recommending is that diesel be at $2.70 and we keep unleaded at $2.80 per gallon. So.
That's odd when diesel's 48 cents a gallon higher than unleaded at the gas pump.
You can't really compare to the gas pumps because our rates are different than that.
We don't have to pay the taxes.
Yes, and we tack on, if I go to the next slide, so this is how the calculation works so that we generate these numbers. The street department provides usage in gallons and cost amounts for all departments through the March 17 through February 2018. Then finance calculates the average fuel rate for this period. So it's based on actual costs of what we're paying for our fuel that we're obtaining, okay? And then we tack on a 20% administration, which is what we call our equivalent to the fuel tax for both diesel and gasoline. And then this year we're also looking at a fuel site maintenance charge, but we think because of the rates that we're getting on the fuel that we can put that in without impacting what we're going to budget for those departments. But we have to look at the possibility of fuel tank replacement and things like that, so we've got to be putting aside monies within this fuel fund for those extraordinary long-term capital needs. And then the departments can make a request for additional interfund fuel charge during their budget presentation, but we are taking into account if within that measurement period their usage went up, we are budgeting for additional usage. So it's somewhat being taken into account. And then if you have more questions as far as on the U.S. Energy Information, their basic on the gasoline, they had it at $2.58 per gallon and diesel at $2.87. But once again, we're talking about not an apple and an orange because the rates that we get are without all the extra charges. And I'll let Tom do more of that detail talk.
So Joyce, before Tom jumps in there, we have, these rates are only at the city pumps.
City fuel site. So
PRT has a site that they fill up with. This doesn't include that.
No, it doesn't include them, and it doesn't include
WPC has a site, does not include them.
But you'll note at the end, we do have a little bit of transit using our fuel site towards the end of the year. They usually run out of their funds. They can't really fill their tanks to full right at the very end of the year, and sometimes they'll utilize Tom's fuel site for fuel when they get towards the end of the fiscal year.
Now,
so just so you're aware of that.
And then fire, there was a time when fire did maintenance. They're still doing maintenance out at PRT. They filled the vehicles up a few times out there.
And like I explained to them when I found out that was occurring, that transit has to charge them for that fuel, and they shouldn't be doing that. They should be using our fuel site. So I think that's been corrected.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Tom Kirkman, Street Operations Superintendent. So a couple of questions. You asked about the PRT and the WPC plants. We lock them out of the system because they've got their own. As far as their monitoring, I think they do that all in-house on their own. To answer some of the questions about the costs, On the unleaded, we have to pay the highway user fee, which is 32 cents a gallon. Diesel, we're allowed to use off-road diesel, so we don't have to pay the 32 cents a gallon extra, so that's why our diesel prices are really low. Every 2 weeks, we bid fuel. We have 6 suppliers we send out bids to every 2 weeks. We try and get about 6,000 or 7,000 gallons of diesel and 3,000 to 4,000 gallons of unleaded, and that way we get a full load and we don't have to pay freight. So it kind of works out for that. And so we're able to get very reasonably priced fuel, and we're kind of, we really don't need to bid it every 2 weeks, but we want to try and get this, these markets can be so volatile that we want to try and stay on top of it. And then we also look at the Energy Information Administration, and we don't really look at their prices, we just kind of look at their trends. And their trend's looking like a little bump, but then it's going to kind of level back out. So the kind of the little algorithm or the formula that finance uses, it looks like it's penciling out to be pretty good as far as we think.
Yeah, we haven't ran into any issues in using this particular matrix for determining budgeting for fuel, and so it has worked for us.
One thing when we do talk about the fuel budgeting in the future or coming up, well, part of our 5-year plan, we're going to need to do some upgrades or some different things moving forward. So, but we can discuss that on that.
Yeah.
So address that 32 cents you're not paying on diesel again.
Yeah, so the unleaded, by law, we don't have, the unleaded we can use, you have to pay the 32 cents per gallon of the highway user fees, but we're allowed to use off-road diesel, which is the number 2, which doesn't have to pay the 32 cents of highway user tax.
So if we computed that against buying diesel trucks, pickups,
It would be very good to buy diesel pickups because we can get it at a good rate.
Well, and it makes sense. I mean, because basically departments like Tom are the ones that benefit from that 32 cents, the highway user. I mean, those dollars come back in. So why charge that entity that you're trying to help facilitate the road development by charging them that additional rate charge? Except that we're using it for multiple areas within the city.
We want the citizens to buy both, because we want that highway user money. So.
Yeah.
But for the city, it's a good deal for diesel. We get diesel at a really good rate, and that's what we use the most of.
Yeah.
Between sanitation, and streets and water during construction, and of course fire.
Right.
the bids you're getting apply to the other departments that don't use this fuel?
We've reached out to them, but they do their own bidding, they do their own purchasing, so it's kind of been in their wheelhouse on that thing.
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it seems like it would be a better served purpose to centralize that a little bit.
Yeah.
PRT has to because they fall under the federal guidelines, right?
They
can
do,
still
but
purchase.
but Tom could negotiate the purchasing and just have the fuel delivered. I don't think there would be an issue on that part. But we could check into any if we moved in that direction, would there be any potential issues? I'm not thinking of any at this point. So.
What about airport?
Yeah, airports, they
Yeah.
do their
They have
own
some
system out there as well.
And they do their own purchasing?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think moving forward, what I don't think we really have any good data to compare is that maybe those departments could track their costs a little better, and then we could have a little bit better of an analysis. But unfortunately, they're kind of guiding their own ship on that one.
Could this be a component of the fleet services?
Yeah, that's what part of our 5-year plan is. We want to look at trying to move our fuel side. It's down on First Street. It's pretty. It's not real advantageous. You kind of go through a neighborhood to get to it. So part of our plan would be to relocate the fuel site there at the facility on Garrow Way. You're at a signalized intersection on an arterial road. It makes more sense for in and out for emergency services. But then we can also, if we're looking to move forward with a new fuel site, then we can start looking into alternative energy sources, compressed natural gas. I mean, we're the Middle East for natural gas here. So there's other opportunities that we can look at moving forward as we look at upgrading our fuel site.
And that's one of our plans with that administrative fee. we have built in the past a certain amount of money that goes into street for the management of this operation. I think our intent will be to shut that off, to allow those monies to accumulate, to facilitate the improvements that are going to be needed at the fuel, at our fuel site.
And it's kind of, sorry Joyce, it's kind of working out good because our fuel site's reaching the end of its useful life. We have 3 12,000 gallon fiberglass tanks and they have a 30-year warranty and we're on year 28. So it's kind of working out.
Are they underground?
Yes, sir.
And remember, it's on land we don't own.
That's the other thing too, is the property was constructed in the early 90s, I believe, on ISU property, so.
That was one of the great things in purchasing the new property is if we move the fuel site there, then we now have it on our property, and it was another addressing of the problem that we're going to be dealing with. But we have to kind of build for that potential switch, and so that's what we're kind of talking about.
If they were to take possession right after we filled all those tanks.
Yeah.
We don't want to say that out loud, do we?
Well, and that may be something in the future that we could negotiate with Idaho State if they want to take over that, and we could work out some sort of a purchase for them.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've done well with our projections on fuel in the past. I think we go with the data you have and go with the projections you've derived from that.
Okay, so we're okay to go with the 270 and the 280 then on that?
I am.
I would accept that.
I would agree with that.
Okay, great.
And if we're high, then we produced a little bit of revenue for other things.
So maybe just to give you a little bit of ease, we use 340,000 gallons of diesel and unleaded. So I mean, if it's off by 10 cents, we're looking, 34,000 amongst all the departments. So it wouldn't be a horrible hit.
No.
But we've been really good throughout the years on
And if we're off
mill.
by being 30 cents a gallon over,
Yeah.
I
Sounds
think
good.
it works out. Okay. The next thing I'm looking for direction on as early as possible, because next week we allow the departments to go in and start working on their budgets, is that we allow the utility funds to follow the rate study, which means they will actually make entries for increases. Now, they've been programmed to say every time they do an increase, for the year based on the rate study, they have to put in that it's a fiscal 19 rate study increase, and so that we know that this increase and what it's related to, so that we can track that. They still are going to provide us detailed information as to what they're increasing and why, so that you have the answer to that. But it doesn't make any sense to not put it into the budget, because this is our budget plan, basically, the rate study is, and so that we're just asking permission that they go ahead and do that on the onset. It just saves us a little time in execution.
the one thing I would like to know is the rate study projects a certain level of revenue and expenses. I would like to know that if we're going to exercise that rate study, that we're living within the parameters of what has been projected.
Are you looking to see whether we're expending more or less, or receiving more revenue or less revenue?
If we're spending more than we thought and not charging, and we're charging what we're starting to consume ourselves.
Well,
and if we're getting too great a profit, we might not need to do so much of a rate increase.
Well, and that's the whole point of the rate study, because by the time you get to the end of this, and like I said, we're probably going to have to go out this spring to start the process, because it is a big process in order for us to produce another rate study. That's what's going to happen. What you're asking for is the rate study, because what we basically do is we say, okay, what did we accomplish that we needed to within this rate study time period? And then how much reserves are sitting out there, and what do we need to do for this next set of needs, and to ensure that we have the proper reserves available. How much do we need to raise the rates? If we have
built excess reserves, which could be a possibility, then that means that next round of rate increases will be much less than what it could have been had we fully expended. So if we start playing and start dropping these percentages down, it gets a little dangerous if we do it within the rate study. In other words, we should allow the rate study to formulate that for us. If we're concerned and our rate study is too long of a period, in other words, I don't want it to be 5 years, I want it to be every 3 years, right? We can shorten that up, but I'm not making that recommendation. But I don't feel comfortable with us trying to analyze and say, what should we do? Because there are a massive amount of rates in trying to trigger, should I not raise that rate because I think I'm bringing in a little bit more revenue than I need to? We could make a change that could impact us very negatively because of the complexity of the rates.
But I think what Roger's asking is are we overspending the rates if we raise the rates 3%? Are we spending 4%? Or are we only spending 1% and we're raising them 3%?
Right, and I understand that. Sometimes projects aren't always executed. You've seen us have to come back because the project didn't complete till the next fiscal year. So if you're measuring that on a per year basis, it will get a little more complex to say, oh, we don't need to raise the rates because we didn't expend like we planned. But then next year what happens is we expend more than we planned because the project completed itself in the following year. That's what I mean by it being, it's a little bit dangerous to look at the rates that way. I would prefer us to stick to the rate study just because there's a protection mechanism. And if we do overbuild reserves, that's when we're going to reap the benefit of it, is in the new rate study plan.
So you're saying that it's just good policy to never alter the rates based upon what we feel, but keep them according to the rate study.
Well, that's what the plan is, and if we try to second guess the plan, then we might be okay and we might not be okay. When I say it's complex data drilling to develop this plan, I'm very serious about it. It takes a large group of my people just generating the information, and then Pocatello taking that information and putting it into their models to determine what we should be doing. The thing is everything's not really even kill in that you execute a year and everything executes in that year and then you execute the next year. I mean, you've seen time and time again where things come back that were planned for the prior year that didn't fully execute until the next year. So it would be very difficult mid-5-year plan to make alterations.
Well, let's say though that we have a 5-year plan, and after year 1 we've realized that the inflation rate that was a calculus of the rate study is way out of line.
Yeah.
In other words, they said 3% rate, but we're at 6 or 8%, and it looks like we're going to be at 6 or 8% inflation for the next 2 or 3 years at least.
Yeah.
It looks like the rate study goes out the window.
Well, and at that point, if I started seeing numbers where it wasn't complying, I think then I would reach back out to Pocatello and say, okay, take a look at our model plan and have them adjust for these variables that weren't known at the time of the study. Okay, because then once again you're still going back and you're going to alter the rates being the multiple levels of rates to the right level in order to adjust for either an increase or a decrease. Either we're going to rely on that tool or we're not. That's really what I'm coming down to. That's why I say I think it's most important. If you feel like 5 years is too long and you feel like there's too many variables that are playing with it, then let's shrink it. But that's...
I guess what I'm asking simply is we have the fiduciary duty to monitor the performance of the rate study against its plan. And if we're not getting the totals to see if we're monitoring, how in the world do we know that we're fulfilling our fiduciary duty?
Well, and part of our monitoring is the reserve review report that I do, and taking a look at where are the reserve level numbers, right? Now remember, reserves, we have some excess reserves, but and they plan for us to have operating reserves, and they plan for us to have a certain level of capital reserves. when I see that we have a positive there, that tells me we probably won't have as much of a rate increase based on the fact that we've built these excess reserves. And so, which leads us back to your statement that we do have a fiduciary duty not to charge more than we need to, right? And my take is, if we think we're building too much, then we should probably go back to Pocatello and say, and do an amended.
But we also have a fiduciary duty to not get too thin as well.
Yes, it's a very, but I'm also monitoring it when I do the financial statements. I'm taking a look, okay. But you can see, we might have budgeted X for, I'm thinking of sanitation because I was looking at that this past week. And their revenue came in stronger than what was planned. But what you can't tell there is, did I have a lot of new homes come in? Do I have a lot of new that wasn't maybe initially planned in the rate study? Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so that additional revenue might not be just excess revenue, but because of additional usage, okay? And so I would expect my expenditures to fall through. What you're trying to see, and I think the reserve review tells us, if we're hitting the mark and we're at least staying within a manageable area, that we're not growing too much in excess reserves, but we are also not under-reserved, which would be your other worry.
Mm-hmm. And so the rate study that we initiate in this coming year, will it take into account what our services are required? Like can it anticipate some sort of the build out of the Northgate?
Yeah, actually Jeff and I were having that conversation that the study has to take into account the possibility and the impact of that additional load that could come into us, and because this rate study will definitely be over that time period. And so, yes, I think that's going to be
well, and it's going to have a couple factors. Factor in what if it really takes off, but what if it really goes slow too? Well, and how committed we are to an area that really doesn't produce the revenue that we need. How do we have rates that subsidize that in essence?
Well, and it could be that we have, and I haven't thought about this too much. It's kind of coming off the top of my head as we're talking, so bear with me. But I'm thinking you'll have your standard rates, and then we may have another study that would be what would be the impact if, let's say how many homes are up there, like a range of homes. We would have to increase the rates by this much more if we have this much growth or this much growth. That might be something we request of them. Do you see what I'm getting at? Mm-hmm. So that we could make the measurement as to what we need to do if the growth occurred, and measuring the growth. Because a 5-year period is pretty big if you're talking about growth that could occur in you don't know how many years, right?
Well, we're also going to put in infrastructure to service an area that will be on our ratepayers, and if we're not getting a substantial amount back from that for a while, then our ratepayers are just going to have to carry that because there won't be the ratepayers to offset that.
Well, the initial infrastructure for the area where the new homes go in, that burden has to be held to the developer. And then when they tap into us is when...
But don't we have, I may be getting way astray, but aren't we going to have to put in an infrastructure that gets to that area? Because they're only going to be working within their area, and we will have to make sure that we're hooking up water and sewer and stuff like that.
I know what you're saying there. And I think that is a topic that's being discussed and hasn't been fully vetted yet.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't really want to comment too much on that until we have things really clear as to where our responsibility will be in that area.
It's kind of like they're going to build the road to the freeway, but somebody's got to make sure the freeway stays open.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and they're all valid questions and points. I just don't think that we've...
Okay, well, I just want to make sure somebody's really looking at that.
No, you have a lot of people really looking at that aspect of it. Yeah. But as far as in relation to the rate study, I think we're going to have to take it into account, but I don't know that you want it built into the main part. I think it would be an additional aspect that we would have to measure to know when to implement that section of it upon the development of growth, right?
That's my take. But until we hire a company and have those conversations, I can't really work the details out. Those are just my thoughts initially.
Sure.
So did this rate study, I presume you did it in 2014?
We had to start it we started it like in the fall of 13.
Okay. So did it say in 2019 the sanitation increase was going to be 3%?
Yeah.
Or was there any local, any discretion range that was built into that?
No, well, it basically builds a 5-year budget plan, and if you want to come by my office, I can show you the rate study itself. And so it's basically, when you get into the documents where it says, this is what the expenditures are going to be for each year, this is what the revenue that needs to be generated in order to meet the demands of the expenditures, and so that's where these percentages are developed off of. But it goes into the detail. It basically has a 5-year budget there. Okay, I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, sort of. That makes me nervous because it makes me wonder if there's a CPI booger factor in there or fuel costs or as those things change.
Do I think there's an inflationary factor that they're moving through there? There has to be. They have to have a standard. Otherwise, you would run into problems. I don't think it's an extremely high factor. I think in personnel, they usually they measure it as a 3% increase each year, which, depending on what you're looking at, we're going to get to numbers here in a minute, that seems conservative. I mean, it seems not too generous, shall we say. When it gets into the supply line items, I'm not sure what they use as a factor between the years, and I'd have to have conversations with Pocatello to understand that. I wasn't an active player in the last rate study, so I don't have as much information on that part of it. On the things that you talk about that doesn't hit the paper, it just hits it with a number, correct? And so, but I can obtain that information if you're wanting to know what that is.
So is this a printed hard copy study,
Yes.
Not a software package with
No,
things you can
it's a
adjust?
printed hard copy.
Okay.
And I have it they break it down into sanitation, water, and WPC, and so I have all 3 sections. And that's what these departments will use as their building block to develop their numbers for their plan. And I'm just looking for direction to allow them to do that for this coming budget development. And if we're okay with that, then I will instruct those departments to move forward. And we're good with that? I'm seeing a lot of
I think so.
head nodding. Okay.
We used to see 6 and 7 and 8% increases, and I think that we focused on getting down to the 3 to 4%, and I think they've done a good job doing that. So.
Well, and I think part of it is as long as you don't, I think when you ran into the risk of those high rate increases, you started changing the percent, saying I'm not going to do it this year, and then you got really hit when you went out for your next rate study.
Yeah.
And so the only time we had a really major, when we did this rate study, there was a major increase for WPC. It was because of the major project that we had to do out there, and that's the only time I've seen really high numbers. As long as we're following the rate study, I think we stay pretty healthy that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Ashley has been so great about running some prelim numbers. We've been working the salary projection file, and so for the hybrid plan and the police plan, which gives a one-step move this year, the total cost to the city at this point is estimated at $621,252. In the fire and ambulance contract, they have a 1% COLA. The total cost is $84,955. This is wages and benefits. So remember, if I pay another $1 in wage, I have to pay more in Social Security and Medicare, I have to pay more in PERSI, I have to pay more in work comp. Those are the variable things that will be impacted. Even if you're police and fire who are no longer in Social Security, we have those replacement plans for the 401k, so it impacts us the same way. Part-time pay scale, a 1.5% increase will cost the city about $30,729. The medical insurance, and we haven't evaluated fires yet, this is because they're not a part of salary projections anymore. And this is at that 11.97% increase, $663,237 for a total projected cost for wages, benefits to the employees of $1,400,173. Also keep in mind that, and this impacts mostly police and fire and ambulance, because they have the required rank and certification increases. There are some certifications in other departments, but this is the big group that has those. These numbers include that movement as well. And then workers' comp, we have not obtained any new rates for the paid classifications. We could still see a little rate increase there. And the other thing is that Percy last year was instructing us to, for fiscal year 18, we were instructed to create a rate increase on our Percy plan for both the employer and the employee side. They postponed the one that was supposed to go into effect this July. I need to find out whether it's postponed to next year, or if the market is doing really great, if that's going to be a canceled thing. We'll have to build that into the budget as well.
When will you know that?
I don't know. That's why I need to get a hold of Percy and talk to them. We received about, I think it was about November, we received the notice that they had canceled the July increase, but they have not said anything. Generally, I think they'll probably wait until June or July when they do their study, because their year end is June 30th. I don't want to wait that long, so right now it's postponed till the next year, so if we need to build it in, we'll build it in for a quarter of the year like we did last year. It was about $60,000 that's in the budget already. It may go up a little bit because with higher pay, you're going to have a little higher amount on that, so we'll determine what we need to do there.
It seems like with Percy, we knew that they were at least saying by now we knew that they were considering an increase.
Yeah.
So I'm curious why we don't know if they're considering the increase this year.
Well, they're not considering it this fiscal year.
For FY19.
But for FY19, technically, I believe what they said is they had postponed the increase for 18 into 19. But I don't know if the markets are doing well, they could end up canceling it altogether. I don't know if we'll receive that wonderful news until much later.
And is their fiscal year July, or is it
July 1 through June 30th. So they'll probably wait until they have their actuary study and go through their process to determine what they're going to need. But if that's the case, we'll build it. The good news is we've already built it once for a quarter of a year, which is what we'd have to build for 19 at this point. And it might have a slight increase, but we've got the majority of it in there already.
If they postponed it, we probably better build it in there.
Yeah. Yeah, well.
They didn't say plan on it, they just said we're postponing it until next year, so that.
Well, all it did is push the decision-making as to whether they're going to do it or not for another year.
Okay.
Well, the erratic markets right now, there's no way to know.
You would know, I mean.
They built up so high that they've probably felt healthy, and then the dive that's taken place in the last 6 weeks or so.
Yeah. Well, they haven't come back and said, we're uncanceling the, so that's good news. But anyway, that's another potential expense that we'll have to possibly look at. Okay. Now, our next meeting will be April 6th. I believe we're going to present an education benefit plan then and get the final guidance on things that we haven't had guidance provided on us at that point. And then at that point, we're going to probably try to tighten out the salary projection file, because we'll be working on building the presentations for May, and it takes us the month of April to do that. So that's kind of the plan at this point. Do you have any questions?
Joyce, this compensation is everybody's throughout the city. It's not just tax funded, right?
No, that's everybody. We haven't broken it out. This is a citywide viewpoint right now. I don't know what the impact is until we do some more analysis as to what it's going to impact on the tax funds versus the non-tax funds.
Okay.
But that'll be our next step. Once we build everything in, now that we know, we'll run with numbers with the Blue Cross numbers at the 11.97%, because that's the direction I heard today. So projection file will reflect those. When we open up the budgets next week for the departments, they're not going to see, we're not going to load in the salary and all of that. We're going to continue working the numbers until probably the April 6th time point, and then we'll load it in and start building our budget presentation reports. So it gives us a little more time to have discussion.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions for Joyce? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess we need to get back to... So we don't have, I can't find it on my thing here, but we don't have anything else, right? So we are adjourned from this meeting, and we're going into a working lunch? Is that...
We don't have one scheduled.
Okay, so there's lunch.
We're just going into lunch.
You're going into lunch, and so council can have their lunch.
So we don't have to work this lunch.
That's right. You can go into, get your lunch and leave, or
So I'm going to dance for a meal.
go from there. Thank you. With that, then we are adjourned.